I mean, the worst bit for me was when I had her that first night in hospital. My husband wasn't allowed to stay, so I'd had her by a planned caesarean section. He had to leave at 8 o'clock, and I felt totally alone. I wasn't being listened to. She was screaming, and I called for the midwives to come in, and they basically told me that she was hungry. It was a hungry cry. So I was breastfeeding her when they said to me that clearly my milk hadn't come in. They took her off me, and they fed her formula off the ward. And they gave her back to me, and she continued to cry, and she started to be sick, and all the sicks were yellow. And in my head, I was thinking, surely this isn't right. I was messaging my sister all night saying, I really don't think there's something is wrong. And then I was discharged the next day, and even in the car on the way home, she was sick again. Anyone that held her had to wear muslins on them because she was throwing up so much. And it wasn't just little possets, it was big projectile vomits. And that was for 4 days. 4 days, and I had additional midwife visits because I begged them in the as they were leaving my house to come out again because I was sure there was something wrong. She'd lost 10% of her birth weight, and they still told me that she looked like a healthy baby.
And what happened? Was she okay? Did she?
She ended up having. She basically became unresponsive, so she lay on my kitchen island, and I rang 111, and I couldn't wake her up. The only thing she kept doing was being sick. So we rushed her to the hospital, where at midnight she was transferred via an ambulance to the Children's Hospital. They were incredible. And she went in for surgery at 4 a.m. in the morning. And the condition is a time-critical surgical emergency. And a delay of 4 days, what it shows is it was systemic failures.
So my baby measured very, very large. Presumably because I had gestational diabetes, it was unknown at this point, and presumably I was high risk. I asked my midwife, my community midwife, am I high risk? Will I be able to have a water birth? And she said, I don't know if you're high risk or not.
It's a similar story. It's just the echoes, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's unknown, no continuity of care. I said, I haven't written a birth plan, and my community midwife said, would you like to? So I scribbled one down in the end on a napkin, but we'll get to that. I had an emergency scan because my son was measuring to be 11 pounds by 39 weeks. They said, you're going to have an induction. It wasn't a question, it was, you're going to have an induction. And I said, well, I'd like to actually have an elective caesarean. I already have PTSD from previous experiences. I am potentially neurodivergent. I was on the pathway for an autism assessment. I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to cope with an induction. Sorry.
It's okay. Take your time, honestly.
They forced me to have an induction, which was 4 days of forced labour.
I was left on the antenatal ward, waiting for a bed in labour ward for over, I think it worked out about 14 hours. So I was about 36 hours into labour at this point. I had been contracting. It just wasn't moving fast enough. I was given a sweep as well on the antenatal ward, which I didn't consent to. She said, oh, you're 1 centimetre dilated, I'm going to sweep. And you're not supposed to do that when waters are broken because there's a risk of infection. So I pushed him out. He was healthy, handed to me. And then about 10 minutes later, I hemorrhaged and I lost about 4 litres of blood in that period. So they were pulling clots and blood out of me, having to weigh it because they didn't actually know how much blood I was losing. And I was rushed to theatre. My husband, I actually think this is really important, my husband was left alone in the room with my blood for over an hour by himself, seeing my blood everywhere, not knowing what was going on. And I woke up in the high dependency unit, but I remember going into theatre, the last thing I thought, I had this sense of calm, thinking, well, I'm about to die, but my son's here and he's healthy. So I obviously woke up in high dependency. And I think for a while I kind of pretended it was all okay. So I don't think I was aware of the trauma and that I'd actually gone through. And I later got diagnosed with PTSD, depression and anxiety. I only really got the diagnosis because I turned to my husband one day and said, I don't want to be alive anymore. And sorry, that's the bit that really gets to me. And it was that moment where I realised, like, this has changed me. And I always say, the NHS saved my life that day, but they took a whole life from me. I've had miscarriages since and had gone into PTSD spirals. So I'm a different woman now, just because they took so much from me that day.